Hello and welcome to another exciting Craft versus Cruft refactoring challenge. And today we've got a very special treat. I've actually opened this up to anyone in the Ladder Labs mentorship community who would like to submit some code that they've written, and we'll refactor it on the show. And if you're not in Ladder Labs, if you're early in your tech career, I recommend checking that out. If you're not, you're welcome to reach out to me and submit some code for one of these episodes as well. I will be giving priority to Ladder Labs, however. So our first contestant has requested to remain anonymous, and they've got a simple little project, which they actually said is their first full project that they've done. So big round of applause for their bravery submitting this. I will promise not to be too mean. Check the description for the GitHub where I will put this code up if you want to follow along. I will put the original in main branch and my refactored version in a separate one. Now, my approach here is going to be that of if I were evaluating this in a professional context. If we're trying to actually make this production code, I understand that this was a personal project. It was not meant to be production code. But I will tell you that every issue that I have noticed so far, many of which we'll address here, I've also seen in professionally created code. So I think this is still very relevant to people who are writing and maintaining professional software. So let's take a little look. We've got a nice README file here. You can't see it, but there's a screenshot of the app as well, which is a great touch in a README file, and says, what the project is for. It's a trivia game about programming knowledge. So that's a neat little idea, right? Like, in order to practice programming, actually make a quiz for learning programming. It's kind of meta. I like that. And they've listed all the user stories here. Over time, there would be too many to list probably, but that's a fine amount now. The installation instructions here, install and run. So I like that those are included and spelled out. I did have a little trouble running it because it requires a plugin to be installed from the VS Code marketplace. I do use VS Code, but it wasn't clear right away that I needed to install that marketplace plugin. So instructions can be slightly clearer, but generally they're there, so that's good. So to run this thing, what do? Right click, index, open with live server. Cool. All right. So we've got our self-scoring trivia game. And it contains some questions about HTML. I'm going to fire up the developer console right away. Okay. I notice it's trying to include a file that doesn't exist, so there's probably a line that needs to be cleaned up in the HTML no matter. And I'm also going to get out of full screen. I'm going to try to resize this a little bit because it looks not too bad. Big, does it look good? Small, we've got some padding issues. I do like the color. It's nice, small and clean. So, it doesn't resize that great as far as it could use some padding on the left, but not too bad. Generally still usable. So let's start the quiz. What language is used for styling web pages? I believe that's CSS. Looks like we've got a JavaScript error there. It's not interfering with the app's ability to function, but there does seem to be some problems showing up there. Let's go next. I'm noticing that these two buttons are styled differently. This one appears to be styled correctly, and then that link isn't colored the same, so that could be changed. What is HTML? That's nice because these all look like plausible answers. I believe it's that one, hypertext markup language. The following sentence is true about a div tag. Div tag is a block level element. Which the following property sets the shadow? Oh man. You know, I'm not really a front-end guy. Okay, I got that right kind of by accident there. Incidentally, I'm a full stack developer leaning towards backend and DevOps, so I'm going to apply what I know to this. But there are going to be people probably who watch this who are a little more up on front end best practices, and just feel free to comment anything you catch that I don't. Let's see, we're getting a few more jobs. All right, we get to the end. My score is apparently 65, and it doesn't say 65 out of what, so that could be a little clearer, but generally this works. And also I don't have anywhere to go. Can I maybe restart after this point? It's just kind of a dead end, but these are minor points. So that's a neat little app. Let's take a look at the code. We've got our index page, very straightforward here. It looks like this is that not found JavaScript file. It's looking for something that's not there, and I guess it doesn't need it. And then quiz 1 HTML is the actual page that does the work. Pretty straightforward, just got radio buttons here. I know some commented out HTML, I'd probably go away. So it looks like quiz.js is the bulk of the code here. We've got a couple hundred lines, so that's where we'll probably be spending most of our time. And then we've got a couple of style sheets, style CSS and an app CSS. I'm not really sure what the difference is between those two, but there might well be a good reason. The indentation's a little inconsistent on this one, but I know how we can address that pretty easily. So that's the structure of the project. Let's look a little more deeply on quiz.js that is doing most of the work here. So first off, we have these questions. I like that they're in this one data object here. It's very data driven. That could maybe be off in another file, keep it a little more separate, but I like this sort of data driven approach here where it's a question and then each one of these has an option. Which has the question and then there are a list of options in the data there. You know what I wonder in this data structure is how is the correct element indicated? It looks to me like the first answer is always the correct one. That seems like kind of an arbitrary limitation, and even if you were to scramble them and show them in random order, it's still kind of a strange way to represent the data. It's not going to be obvious. Someone else is going to come on and add another question and not know that they're supposed to make the first one be the right answer. So maybe it would be better to represent that in a separate data element, correct answer index or something. So going through the code, because overall we've got a nice, happy little data structure there. Now, I noticed that there's no dependencies. There's no package JSON. This is no, other JavaScript being included. This is a plain JavaScript file. This is old school, right? We're using document query selectors and stuff, and for, a code base that's 200 lines long, that's actually totally reasonable. Do we really need to bring jQuery or even, the likes of Vue and React and Angular into this situation? As the app scales, we would consider doing that. But I think it's a totally reasonable decision on something this simple to just avoid those extra dependencies, do it in plain JavaScript. And I understand it was a learning project as well. Do you really want someone going off and using React before they have implemented logic in the old-fashioned way? I think this is a good place to start. Now, I'm seeing a lot of comments before these lines, almost every line having in places a comment before it saying what they're doing. Whenever I see that, I wonder, can the code just express what this is? For example, select next button. Well, we've got a variable called next button and a query selector selecting this next class, assigning it. It seems like that communicates this perfectly. I don't think we need that. And you probably see a lot of similar comments that aren't really adding anything to the code. If they are adding something to the code, if they're communicating something that the code doesn't already say, then that's where I look at, can we make the code clearer? And we will look at some examples of that. And only as a last resort will I actually write a comment. I will try to make the code readable first, is my approach. But traditionally, in school, they're probably still teaching to do this, to just say, do the same thing the line does right before the line. So I understand where that's coming from. So a lot of initialization here. I like that we're using let and const instead of var, which is the older JS thing. So good job there. I'm going to look for situations where we're using let where we could use const. If we don't need to update it, then let's use const as much as possible. I don't know what's the case with these yet. And it looks like there's just 2 or 3 main functions here. There's get question, and that's also called out here. And then there's handle next question. And then we've got display timer. Now it seems a lot's happening out here in the global scope, where as an app scales, if you were to include another file, it might very well have something called container out here, something called result. It's very easy to start having name collisions when you start doing things out in the global scope in JavaScript. So that's not usually a good idea. One way people sometimes address this is they'll put a function out in the middle of space, like just an anonymous function, and then they'll have like everything in there. So like a huge file in the middle of this function, and then at the end of it, they will invoke that single function. So if you ever see that pattern, which is kind of strange, that's what it's doing. This is just being used to enclose a scope, and nothing else is all this function would be doing then. And if we did that, then it'd be a little safer. Then this file could coexist with other files a little more safely. I realize right now this is the only thing in the global scope, but in a professional context, you're gonna run into those situations, and you're gonna want to protect yourself from them. We can also look at other ways we can limit the amount of state that's floating around here. So another thing that I'm noticing is, because this is a traditional plain JavaScript app, everything with document query selectors and directly and so forth, you get a lot of business logic mixed in with this display logic, this document manipulation. Manipulating, they call it the DOM, right? The document object model. So really you want to separate those things typically. You want to have some separation between DOM manipulation and the business logic. And we'll see what that actually looks like. I know it's kind of nebulous. When you see stuff about clean code, we'll talk about separation of concerns. You might wonder, separating what from what? What is a separate concern? What's that even mean? And this is a great example of that, right? DOM manipulation is usually considered like one concern. So I think the first thing I would like to do in my initial pass is to just evaluate all of these comments and see which ones, like that button one, aren't needed at all. And perhaps if there's commented out code and stuff, get rid of that. And then if there's a comment that is adding value, can I rephrase the code so it communicates that same thing? But right now I can't change this code with confidence because I might break it. I don't have any real assurance because there are no tests. And as a code base grows and is manipulated by more and more people, that becomes more and more of an issue. So we're now saying we're going to treat this like production code. It's a good time to start adding some automated checks. Because this code relies so heavily on DOM manipulation, it would be very hard to start right away with unit level tests. We would have to change the structure of the code pretty significantly to be able to do that. So I think I'm going to start with some basic end-to-end tests. And there are a lot of different tools you could use. Nightwatch is really popular. It's one of the wrappers of Selenium. Recently, Cypress has gained some favor, so let's try out Cypress on that. And I think I would also like to add a linter and a formatter to find any other issues pretty quickly. So first things first, let's add ESLint, which is a popular JavaScript linter. I don't have this stuff memorized or anything, so let's just go in there. I know this is a pretty good tool though. Let's see, getting started. They've still, JavaScript community's trying to figure out whether they use NPM or Yarn. I think NPM is the more vanilla choice there. It comes with a node environment. So let's just install that. We're saving it as a development dependency in this project. All right. So we've got a package lock JSON, no package JSON yet, but this is going to become, at least for the context of running build and test stuff, it's going to become a node project, but it's not going to actually have a server side though. It's still just going to be static HTML and JavaScript. I don't see a reason to deviate from that. So let's see, then we do this init to create our config file for ESLint. Check syntax, find problems, enforce code style. Sounds good. What types of modules? I guess we use JavaScript modules. We don't use either of those frameworks. Do we use TypeScript? No, we don't. Wouldn't be the worst idea I've heard. I've enjoyed TypeScript. Where does it run? It runs in the browser, not in Node. Use a popular style guide. Yeah, sounds good. Whatever. Format the config file in JavaScript. Why not? All right, and it's griping at me because we don't have package JSON, so we'll have to go through that again. Once we do, npm init will get us one of those. Let's find package name, version 1, description. We'll just paste in the description from the README. Yeah, it's an entry point, sure. No test command yet. We have not given it a license. I'll indicate that. Yes, sounds good to me. So now we can initialize ESLint. All right, would you like to install the dependencies? Yes. Nice. All right, so we followed that step. What's next? We can now run ESLint on our quiz file. Hey, it found some problems. So, container is assigned to a value but never used. Answer is assigned to a value but never used. And interval is not defined. Let's take a look at that last one, for example. This may have been one of the JavaScript errors we were seeing earlier. So here we're using this variable interval, which from how it's being used with clear interval, that means that there was a set interval. Typically that would be assigned to this, and maybe this was half done. So this looks like this wouldn't work, but timer, I remember we took that functionality out of quiz HTML. Yeah, that was commented out. So that's probably a half-finished feature there. Cool, so this linter has pulled its weight right away. We found some things we can clean up. These are, this is why it's great to have that around. Now, once we've got one of these things we like to run, like, do I want to remember this command? Probably not. Let's put that in the package.json script here. And really star JS in case we should add more JavaScript later. Oftentimes you'll use a glob ** *star JS. We might do that later. But now if I do npm run lint, yeah, it'll run that and then say it failed. Now I mentioned we might do a formatter as well. It's kind of superficial, but why not? Why not start there? So I know Prettify.js is a pretty good tool. Prettify, something like that. Let's see if we can find that in Node. Prettier. That sounds familiar. I think that's it. Yeah. Well, they even have a page about prettiers versus linters. Focus, Ray, focus. All right, so let's do this same thing here. Let's save this guy as a dev dependency. Looks like it wants us to create an empty config file, so let's go ahead and do that. And it wants a prettier ignore file. Which reminds me, I'm not seeing a get ignore file here. We're going to need one of those before too long. Like, for example, to ignore this node modules folder, right? There we go. Now that won't get committed. And they're saying these are some normal things to ignore in Prettier Ignore. I suppose node modules would be another good one. All right. So let's commit this here. What do you say? We've got node modules ignored, so nothing we don't intend here. Package lock.json is a good idea to commit, so check into that if you're not aware. So add linter formatter. Make sure this guy still works even though we didn't really change the code. Yeah, it seems to. So it looks like we can now format the code by running this. And it actually finds an error as well in the HTML, just a little issue with how these paragraphs are being done. There's kind of like an empty paragraph here. So it looked like typically the way you would do this would be end one paragraph, have another paragraph. Okay, and formatting's a little off here, but Prettier's going to take care of that for us. Nice. So the first time we do this, it's going to have a ton of changes. So I'm putting this in its own commit, right? Like it's wrought havoc on our git change log. But the idea is once you've done this, and if you keep doing it, you can even put this in a git hook, a pre-commit hook that'll run the Prettier formatter regularly. Then you'll actually see, less conflicts that are created by one person's editor settings being different than someone else's or what have you. So it's nice to have an automated formatting on a code base, though this is pretty nitpicky at this point in our progression. I'm just adding it because it's a low-hanging fruit. Now you'll notice there's like a ton of configuration files. These aren't part of the actual static content of the app, but like all this support stuff, these config files. So this is where it would be nice to break off the source code into its own little area. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to make a source dir, and I'll just drag these into there. Move and style. I think that's all the relevant files. Make sure we got it. Open it up again. Yep, all's well. And you might even divide it further if you wanted, source/JS, source/style. I also noticed this SS for screenshot. I would probably put that in a doc folder, because it's not clear what SS out in the middle of anything does. This is really nitpicky, but won't hurt anything. So let's go ahead and do that. And more important than what personal preferences are on project structure is whatever your team's doing, whatever your company's doing, try to make project structures match each other so people know what to expect. All right, another small commit. Now I mentioned that I want to refactor this JavaScript in quiz.js. Are we much closer to being able to do that? Well, we're not quite there yet. We don't have any tests around this, but as I mentioned, some end-to-end tests might go a long way. And let's try this Cypress tool, huh? Been hearing a lot about this. So, how to use Cypress. My favorite feature of it is that it does not contain Selenium. If you know, you know. So, let's save this as a dev dependency as well. Then what are we gonna do? Looks like then we use that to open it, or npx, sure. All right, we've installed it, so these are all going into dev dependencies and not dependencies because they're not part of the app itself. All right, open this guy up. Oh, and it's populated a bunch of examples which we can promptly delete. So how do these work? Let's go into some web page and running all this stuff. Okay, this is neat. So we want to make something like that runs our app, and so we can test, that it's still working. Interesting. Okay, so let's put this in Cypress integration, then this examples folder. All right, let's get that the hell out of here. What else have we got? We got test fixtures and commands and stuff. We've got various concepts that I don't feel the need to learn about right now. Let's say, okay, how do we make a test? We need a script to open this guy too. Sounds good. Great. And then there'll be another one to run the tests once we're ready and we have some. There's also this prettier command I haven't put in there yet, so let's put that in there. So, writing our first test. Add a test file. We're calling it sample spec. We'll call ours quiz spec. Okay. So they've just got this vacuous test they're putting here. Let's try that. All right, cool. So we need this to use our website that we've got running in VS Code. Incidentally, we probably also put in a Node script that can run this from the command line, so we're not bound to a particular editor, but we'll get to that. We want to run it in continuous integration and so forth. Right, real test, visit a page. Okay, we're visiting a web page. I've used Selenium and stuff before, so this is kind of looking familiar. I just need to know the details, but I kind of know the verbs that we're looking to do, right? We're looking to visit a web page and then, use it, click things and whatnot. So we'll go to our index page. Was it able to do that much? Yep. So we've got our home page in there. Now, after we visit the page, we have some expectations. It contains something, for example. What does it contain? It contains welcome. That's a good assertion. Okay, contains welcome. Great, it does. And then, what do we want to do next? We probably want to click Start Quiz. So how are they doing that? They're looking for contain something, and then they click. You can click the thing that you've asserted exists, that contains that. So how is the casing on that Start Quiz? And let's click that. All right, cool. So our test has gotten to that part. So this is a good test right there. Maybe at that point there's a next button or something that asserts that we've gotten to this page. Nice. So let's make a test that goes a little deeper. So answer first question. We've got duplication here of the index URL. So let's just pull that up here. Maybe it should go in fixtures or whatever. I don't know how they structure these things, but better to have it one of them than two of them. So let's pull that into a constant. So here we go. We'll say contains CSS and click in order to select that. And then click the next button. Great, we got to the correct page, so that's the message we should maybe look for next, right? El Cypress. Look for answer is correct. All right, and what if we were to click HTML? We want to not say that we're correct in that case, right? So we did the happy path, now we'll do the sad path. Now we want your answer is wrong. An inconsistent casing there, I'm not too concerned with that. Great. Now, if we wanted to have this be a complete test, perhaps we would go through the entire app and, that we get to the end. But because there's only that one set of questions, we can't substitute like a shorter set of questions. We would have to go pretty far in order to do that. But this is honestly pretty good. We get a fair amount of confidence, not complete confidence in every feature, but a lot of the code base is covered by the fact that we can just go to the quiz page, select a question right or wrong, and get feedback on the next page. So I kind of like this. Now I'm going to enter in a sad path here, thinking like a QA, right? I'm going to say answer first question, or rather click next with no answer. So it should not advance with no answer selected. So I'm going to do the same scenario, but I'm just not going to click HTML. I'm going to try to advance to the next question without selecting something. And let's see what we should have here. See what happens. All right, type error, cannot read property value of null. So we found a little problem with the code here, right? This was maybe one of those kinds of errors that could show up in the dev console. And so really it should probably handle that error, account for it in the code somehow, and display a message like, hey, you have to select something. But instead it's just making a little error in the background. No big deal. So we can look at that here. Now, okay, your answer is correct. We must be close to it here. Proven conditions. Okay, so we're looking for a checked radio button, but there wasn't one. So this is where we're dereferencing null, and that must be where that type error is coming from. So, well, what if we just say, for now, if not selected answer, no answer, to do show message, and just early exit this method. What if we reran it now? Yeah, now we're handling it at least in a way that the test is happy with. It's not great to leave it to do in the code like this, but this will get us in a committable state. We're at least green now. So great. Let's add this Cypress directory. Might be better in like a test folder, the subfolder of that, but I'm not thinking too hard right now about that project structure. Add and to and tests. And let's add this run option as well. See, make sure we can run that from the command line. It only works because the live server is running as well, but good for now. It says something about a video. This is cool. What's this? So Cypress will just automatically save a video of your test runs. Like, how cool is that, right? I don't want to check that in, though. We better add that to the git ignore. Some people might want to check it in. I do not. Oh, and one more thing, you notice this DS store file, which Macs just like to create for some reason, accidentally got added here. We don't want that anymore, and we can add it to the git ignore, but better yet, let's actually just take a git ignore from a node project, just a standard git ignore, and plop it in there. It's usually a good It's usually a good idea, is whatever the kinds of project you're dealing with. Just get the common stuff in there, throw it in your git ignore, and you won't have to worry about those kinds of things coming up. Alright, so we haven't made a lot of changes to the code itself, but we have made leaps and bounds at making this a maintainable project that we can change with more confidence by adding the linter, the automated tests, and so on. So let's reconvene and get into the code next time. Thank you.